Call this meeting of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills Planning Board to order. It's Monday, October 21st at 7:32 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given, and it's being conducted in accordance with NJSA 10:4-6 et seq. Of the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act. I ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seated. Ask everyone to please make sure that your cell phones are muted or silenced for alerts and ringtones. I'll open the meeting now for the general public for anything that is not on our agenda for this evening. Please come forward. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public portion. Please call the roll.
Mr. O'Perlick.
Here.
Councilman DiPiero.
Here.
Mr. Dinsmore.
Here.
Ms. Hernandez. Here. Mr. Mealy.
Here.
Ms. Veely. Here. Mr. Von Aiken.
Here.
Chairman Keller.
Here.
We also have with us tonight our board planner, Ms. Fafate. Here. Our board attorney, Mr. Carlson.
Here.
And our board engineer, Mr. Holloway.
Here.
Okay, we have a resolution to approve.
Do you have those resolutions?
You're only doing one.
Someone move the resolution for Navarro.
You just have this.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, in application number 18:511, Consolacion Navarro, 544 Allentine Road, I move we grant move the resolution granting minor subdivision with C variance.
Denying.
Denying. Sorry. Is that the?
Is there a second? Mealy? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. O'Perlick.
Yes.
Councilman DiPiero.
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore.
Yes.
Ms. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Mealy.
Yes.
Ms. Veely.
Yes.
Mr. Von Aiken.
Yes.
Chairman Keller.
Yes. Okay, the minutes of...
Chairman,
July
before you
22nd.
proceed, if I may, I know that the
Okay.
Severino resolution is on the agenda for tonight. That will be prepared for next meeting.
Okay, minutes of July 22nd.
July 22nd. So moved, Mr. Dinsmore.
Second,
Second, Von Aiken.
Von Aiken seconds. Please call the roll.
Mr. O'Perlick.
Yes.
Councilman DiPiero.
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore.
Yes.
Ms. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Mealy.
Yes.
Ms. Veely.
Yes.
Mr. Von Aiken.
Yes.
Chairman Keller.
Yes. Okay, on our agenda for this evening is the application number 19:509, Pudding Stone Developers. Minor subdivision with C variance and a major soil moving permit.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Joseph O'Neill of Garofalo O'Neill Ruggiero here on behalf of the applicant. This is a 3-lot subdivision. And with me is Mr. McClellan, who will help me with the waiver requests.
Okay. Sworn.
Yes, sir. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you state and spell your name for the record, please?
Certainly. My name is Patrick McClellan, MCCLELLAN, the firm of MCB Engineering Associates in Cotawood, New Jersey, and a licensed professional engineer.
And you'll be testifying as an engineer tonight?
Yes, sir.
So would you give the board the benefit of your qualifications and experience, please?
Certainly. I'm a 1989 graduate of the New Jersey Institute of Technology with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 1994. License is current as of today, to the best of my knowledge. I'm the 50% owner of the firm MCB Engineering Associates since 2002. I've had the pleasure of appearing before this board and the Board of Adjustment on many occasions, as well as approximately 150 land use boards throughout the state.
Mr. O'Neill, before we let Mr. McClellan testify to the waivers, can you just give a brief overview of what this application is about?
Yes, this application is about basically moving lot lines and moving.
Can you get closer to the microphone, Joe?
Oh,
As I
Sorry
was
about
saying, this application is about basically moving lot lines on 3 lots as part of this subdivision, which was originally approved back in 2002, I believe. It's been under construction since that time. These are near the end of the developmental process itself. One of these lots contains the pump station that was already that's already been constructed, and the other 2 lots are going to be residential lots. The original layout of the lots, as Mr. McClellan will get into as part of his application, was to have 2 smaller subdivision lots for residential homes, and a lot with a large back end to it would be where the pump station was. And the experience of the client and the experience of Mr. McClellan has shown us that when you leave undeveloped property like that behind residential properties, basically the residents start clearing into the line because they don't know where the subdivision line is. So the better solution was just go ahead, give that property to the residences. It also alleviates the need for a lot of retaining walls, which were originally contemplated as part of the application. This reduces greatly the retaining walls needed to develop the lots. There is some disturbance of steep slopes under the current slope ordinance. That's what we'll be talking about here this evening. There's soil moving, there's soil moving going on the other sections of the property now. There are other approved soil moving permits. So that work is still going on under the supervision of the Township Engineer's Office. But this would be, we're going for a new soil moving permit because we're changing the lot configuration with the slope lines. As again, we're disturbing the slopes to reduce the numbers of walls. Mr. McClellan will testify why we think that's a good idea from an environmental point of view, from a practical point of view also. You don't have to maintain walls when you don't have them. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Okay.
So, Mr. McClellan, we received a report from DFJ Planning dated September 17th, 2019, which is detailing the waivers that we've requested. Why don't we run through those requested waivers, why we're requesting them, and whether we'll be testifying to that tonight or asking for a waiver completely from that.
Certainly. Starting on the bottom of page 1, Appendix A, number 12, DEP letter of interpretation. We've consulted with the applicant's environmental consultant, Equal Sciences. They've walked the site. They do not cite any wetlands on the property. They did cite some potential wetland areas off-site to the east of the property. It's our opinion, based on their findings, that that there is no adverse impact from those wetlands. So we were asking the board to consider Equal Sciences delineation rather than having a formal absence presence determination.
All right. So I think we'll deal with them. We want to deal them one at a time, or what's your preference, all together?
Susan, what are your thoughts here?
Maybe go through them all and then see what the board thinks.
That's probably best.
Okay.
All right.
Pat, why don't you just keep going?
Yeah.
Sure. Item 13, protective covenants and deed restrictions. I have no knowledge of any, and Mr. O'Neill, I would, if you're not aware of any, to supplement or support my answer, but I'm not aware of any protective covenants or deeds on these properties. On page 2, Form 4 for minor subdivision, general description of the application. Mr. O'Neill provided that in his opening statements, and I suspect that plus the testimony that's forthcoming will provide the board with adequate description of the project. Item 8, zoning district, the plans will be corrected to indicate that all of the lots are in the R1 zone, and we'll be testifying on that basis this evening. Item 9, adjacent property owners.
That's provided.
That has been provided to the board since. Item 13, location of natural features. Again, on this particular property, the environmental constraint primarily is steep slopes, and there's topographic information, plus we provided a slope study to depict those in accordance with your ordinance. We have no wetlands on site, we have no floodplains on site. So we've, as far as the property itself, I believe we've adequately represented the natural features, and we'd ask the board to consider that. And again, through testimony, we'll be providing more description of the property. We hope that the board would find that satisfactory. Location of streets. This property happens to be located on the backside of a cul-de-sac, Beverly Street. There are no new roads proposed. It's a very small frontage for these properties. So location of streets, there are no new streets proposed. Item 18, utility service. Applicant should indicate locations of water and sewer connections. We actually do have them on the plan. The plan's very busy, but they are on the plan. There'll need to be a water connection and a sewer connection for each lot. And as testimony will reveal forthcoming, there's a comment from your engineer that should the application be approved and moves into construction, there would be lot development plans required for each lot, and that would be the ideal time to tie down exactly where those utility connections would go. Item 19, storm drainage, the same approach. We certainly agree with the determination that this is major development, which means that we have to follow the rules of the state of New Jersey for stormwater management. Those details are not on the subdivision plans, but should be provided in detail at the time of the lot development plan. And the reason why we ask for it to be there, one, your engineer's letter suggests that we think it's a good idea, and two, because at that time we'll have all the details of how those lots are going to be developed, and we can come up with an innovative system that satisfies all the state's criteria. So we're just deferring that to the time of the lot development plan. Item 21, dedication of streets. Again, there are no new streets proposed, so we're not proposing any, so waiver is recommended by your planner. Fences, walls, and sidewalks, a variance requested for height of retaining wall where a maximum of 6 feet is permitted and 14.5 feet is proposed. Just to be clear, there's only one wall on the plan that's proposed, and that wall we're proposing to be 14.5 feet at its highest point because of the strategy of changing the lot configurations. We're proposing to grade these sites out. We needed some room to do that, so but we have eliminated the need for extensive amounts of walls like we've seen on a lot of the smaller lots in Pudding Stone. The walls that are indicated, just for information, around the pump station exist. They were built some around 2002, 2003, so they've been in place for over a decade. So this application only proposes one wall. Landscaping, applicant should provide detail of tree removal and mitigation measures, and we understand that comment. We didn't propose that at this time, but again, we think that's would make sense to do at the time of the lot development plan, because this will know precisely where driveways are going and what trees are coming down, and then we can propose a mitigation plan at that time that would be consistent with the lot development plan that's proposed. We'd ask the board to consider that as a waiver for tonight. Construction details, conceptual floor plans, and architectural elevations for the proposed home at 4511. Okay. It's our understanding that the applicant intends to build a consistent dwelling on 4510 and 4511 that's being built in that development now. So again, we can provide those details to the board, but since it's the same unit that's being constructed on other lots, we'd ask the board to consider the waiver so that we can continue tonight. Traffic study, again, we're not proposing an increase in dwellings. We're just rearranging lot lines. We're not adding a dwelling, so we're not changing the impact to the traffic. So we're requesting a waiver, and your planner has recommended such. Item 26, environmental assessment study. The reason why we ask for that waiver, we recognize the sensitivity of the property. We recognize there are trees being removed, that there are steep slopes, there are no wetlands on site, but they are off site. What we're only asking for the waiver from the formal report, but our plan, through its content, we have a soil erosion plan to show how we would handle the construction activities and mitigate any soil erosion. Again, for the one wall that we are proposing, it would be built, in accordance with current construction standards and technologies, so there'd be proper soil erosion in place. The walls would be built, out of proper materials and proper design. We'll be discussing the extent of the slope disturbances here, and any remediation of the soils is going to be subject to the rules of the Morris County Soil Conservation District, which incidentally, I believe we have that permit in hand or at this time.
So if I may, Mr. McClellan, why not simply provide the environmental assessment study? I mean,
We're going to provide the information contained in an environmental assessment study through testimony.
right, Mr. O'Neill, but it's a checklist requirement, and the variances sought here are primarily environmental in nature. So if we're not to require it on this application, what application would it be required for?
Can't really speak to that type of a concept, but the concept of the information being provided to the board so the board can make a decision is something we agree with and plan to address through testimony.
Understood, but okay, continue.
On the next page, under Form 10, C variances, Item 5 zoning district, see comment above. Again, I think we have some discrepancies on our cover page that we have to clean up, which we will address. Item 9, location of natural features. Again, the site itself has steep slopes, which are clearly an environmentally sensitive area, which are delineated on the plans. There are no streams or floodplains or wetlands on site, so there aren't those features to identify. Item 11, existing and proposed buildings. Proposed revisions to previously approved limits of disturbance are indicated but not clear in the plans. We have exhibits that are going to clarify that. They are shown on the plan, but again, we respect that the plans are busy. So we have some exhibits that are cleaned up and colorized so we can help the board understand precisely what the changes are with this application. Item 12, floor plan and elevations. Again, like the testimony prior, they're not submitted, but the 2 dwellings that are expected to be constructed are consistent with the dwellings that are being constructed at Pudding Stone Ridge. Item 13, parking, more detailed, including widths, materials, elevation should be provided on the driveway serving the homes. And again, we have a grading plan. I don't believe we provided a cross-section or a detail. I certainly can provide that through testimony as I'm going through the proposed conditions. And hopefully the board will find that satisfactory. And then fences, walls, and sidewalks and utility services I discussed from the previous section. So respectfully, the same commentary to those. And that's the list, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I may have just an additional moment to address Mr. Carlson's concern about the environmental impact waiver. We do certainly agree that that's an important item to be considered by the board, and the information contained there is important. And I recognize that there's a lot of input and been a lot of complaint from the public. We're not conducting this evening's hearing in a vacuum or a bubble. We're aware of other people's complaints about this project as a whole. This is a project dating from 2002. It was a 44-lot subdivision. We are here tonight for 3 of those lots moving lot lines, not the whole 44-lot subdivision. Every time we have come back for variances to various boards for modification to that 2002 plan, everyone comes out and they want to talk about the whole project, the whole 2002 subdivision, and we don't do that because we're not talking about that. That's over. That was over back then. We're just talking about the new application. So I know there's a lot of concern from the public. They've been to the council. There have been various complaints to perhaps yourselves, but we're only talking about 3 lots. That's why we're asking for the waiver of the environmental impact statement.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Holloway and I met last week with Mr. O'Neill, and we discussed, a little bit about the environmental impacts, and I think we made it fairly clear to the applicant that they need to provide a clear discussion about the relative impacts, particularly regarding the steep slopes and the grading versus for the current application versus what's already approved. So I'm hopeful that that will be in testimony tonight, and then the planning board can make a determination as to whether that's sufficient in thinking about the environmental assessment statement. But certainly it should, at a minimum, be discussed in testimony tonight, and we'll
Yes, we do have a lot of exhibits to talk to that.
We've requested a rather long list of waivers, and it's difficult to sit here and not have an item that's on the checklist, not have it provided, in determining whether or not an application is complete. A large number of the public has come out in this case too, and I have no idea what their intentions are, if they want to talk about 3 lots or 44 lots. I can't second guess them. But certainly, as going through the waivers, you've changed a lot of things around on these 3 lots to, it appears, to minimize impact. And I appreciate that, and I'm sure the public does as well. But we still go back to a checklist item that wasn't checked. I'll defer to the members of my board on whether or not they wish to proceed tonight and take testimony in lieu of that checklist item. Does anyone, I'd like to go down the line, Nora, and get the thoughts of the members of the board.
Mr. O'Carroll?
Well, before you do that, I'm just curious, why would you not want to present that item?
We're presenting the information through testimony. We're presenting all that information.
I understand that, but the concern is you're not presenting that item itself. Why is that a problem?
The environmental impact statement is a particular type of report. It's generated. If I may proceed without interruption from the public, Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate it.
Go ahead.
We are talking about 3-lot subdivision, and the environmental impact statement contains.
Is that mic on?
The mic is on.
Maybe you could pull it closer, Mr. O'Neill. Thank you.
The environmental impact statement is a particular type of report containing information detailed by Mr. McClellan. Can you hear me all right back there? So we're providing that information through a series of exhibits particular to this application, and the soil moving permit and the other items that we've addressed. We're going to provide that information through testimony. If you feel we're not providing you with the necessary amount of information, you could always ask for us to come back with an environmental impact statement. But we think we're going to satisfy it completely through our testimony. That's why we're asking for the waiver. We think it's a little easier to present it through testimony procedurally with the exhibits and Mr. McClellan fielding questions. That's why we're asking for a waiver, because it's only 3 lots. If it was a larger 44-lot subdivision, it'd be too much information to process at the board level. And your engineer would probably want to see some particular information regarding the overall development of the lots.
Mr.
But this
O'Neill,
is 3
Are you
lots.
saying that the environmental impact statement addresses 44 lots and not just 3?
No, I'm saying that it would be an environmental impact statement for 3 lots. And we can provide that information through testimony. We can provide a full picture of that through the testimony
But
tonight.
if I may, Mr. O'Neill, if you're going to be argumentative, there's a reason why it's a checklist item. Because it's supposed to be submitted to the boards for their consideration prior to the application being deemed complete.
That's absolutely correct, and there's also a procedure for waivers for that. That's why we're asking for the waiver.
There is. So you were asked a simple question as to why you would need an environmental impact statement, particularly in this application where I think nearly all of the variances being requested are environmental in nature.
May I ask?
We're providing,
Chair,
Mr. Hernandez has a question.
yeah, for these 3 lots, so the steep slopes is the variance that you're asking for, has it changed for the better or for the worse since the last time?
we think it's a better solution because it doesn't
A better
require
solution,
walls.
but are they, is it
different
disturbing
variance.
more of this area?
The slopes are going to be disturbed anyway, so we think that this is a better solution for that.
Well, they'll be
If-
disturbed
if I may,
anyway,
I
if the
think-
variance,
I think the question is how much,
right.
right? And that's what we
Well,
discussed
I'm
last
just the
week.
attorney. I can't answer how much. That's why I need the guy to the right.
Yeah.
And the argument that I
Quite
need.
frankly,
I
that's why
can't-
we need an environmental impact statement.
Well, the argument that I can't have a waiver for an environmental impact statement because I'm looking for a waiver is a little circular. We're trying to say we're providing that information through testimony.
No, but you're not repaving a driveway here. You're disturbing steep slopes. There's a difference.
Well, I'll certainly leave it to the board.
I would actually like to ask our engineer if he's had enough time to look at this and if this is sufficient without the environmental impact statement.
I think there's enough information that can be provided for these 3 lots that can be handled with testimony.
Okay.
The amount of information that has to be presented, I think that can be presented in testimony.
So then let's hear the testimony, and if we're not satisfied,
I'd like to,
With all due respect, I would like to poll the board and find their feelings on giving a waiver for a checklist item that's not been provided, and if testimony is sufficient. Please call the roll.
Mr. Perelik.
yes, I'd like to see more in the way of a completion of the checklist.
That means you're against approving
Yes.
the waiver.
I'm against approving the waiver.
Councilman DePiero.
well, I could go either way. If the testimony didn't satisfy me, then I would go back to the waiver.
If I may, just to clarify for everybody on the board, once the waiver is granted, the application is in fact complete, and then at that point, you're left to the merits of the application. It's a matter of, do you want to see this information before, or are you okay with seeing it for the first time tonight, is really the question before you.
You can't grant the waiver, essentially give the application a green light, and then put a red light up somewhere down the road.
You can't.
You grant the waiver, you grant the waiver.
Okay, then I have to deny the waiver too.
Mr. Dinsmore.
It's a checklist item. I feel it's important. I would deny the waiver as well.
Ms. Hernandez.
I will deny the waiver as well.
Mr. Mealy.
I agree with what has been testified up to now by the members.
Ms. Veely.
I disagree. Our engineer is our expert, and if he tells me that it can be heard in testimony, then I would agree with our engineer and like to hear the testimony. We're all here. We're all going to have to come back again and hear the whole thing all over again. We're here. I think we should hear it. And my engineer is telling me, and that's where my faith is in our engineer.
Mr. Von Aiken.
Well, I don't appreciate the idea that presenting this checklist item in advance would somehow be too much information for the members of the board to consume. So I don't appreciate that comment.
I didn't
you don't
mean
have
to
to
apply
answer.
that. I didn't
You
mean
don't
to
have to
apply that.
answer. What I will say though is that information is what we build our questions off of. We have copious notes about that information that was provided, and that's why it's a checklist item. Now, with that said, our engineer, I agree with Ms. Veely, says that there's sufficient, the scope of this project is such that testimony would be sufficient, and along that lines, I'm willing to go ahead with testimony and grant a waiver.
Chairman Keller.
I wrestled with this, and I understand the testimony idea. We've on other issues on the checklist, we've done that, but this is a significant disturbance of steep slopes with an ordinance that wasn't there in 2002 when the original subdivision was approved. The engineer says that we can hear it. I would tend to go along with that. But like I said before, if you grant a green light, you can't say, oh, wait a minute, it's not enough. The alternative or the possibility there then is to say, no, it's not enough, and then the application has to get denied. Is the only way to stop it. And I present that to you. If you want to proceed tonight testimony, and you've heard the members of the board speak, if they feel that you have not given enough, then you got to come back with a new application. Or you can wait tonight and say, all right, we'll provide the EIS and we'll continue at that time. So I leave it up to you to proceed or not.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that opportunity, and thank you to the board members for your comments. Hearing the comments of the board, will withdraw the request for the waiver and provide the environmental impact statement.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we all keep calling it an environmental impact statement, and I just want to clarify it's an environmental assessment study. An environmental impact statement,
okay, separate.
Mr. O'Neill is correct that tends to be a much larger undertaking than I think is contemplated in your regulation. Not that you don't provide all the sufficient evidence, but a federal environmental impact statement is typically could be many, many, many pages. And I think that they probably have a lot of the material already done. My hope is that you could provide sufficient evidence for this board to consider.
I stand corrected. So I guess we'll need a new date.
December 2nd.
We'd ask that be done without further notice.
No further notice
We'll grant
needed.
no
You
further
extend the time to decide the application, I'm sure, until that date.
We'll grant all necessary extensions through the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Okay, for the members of the public, what's happening now is this application is being carried to, what's the date?
December 2nd.
December 2nd. No further notice will be provided to you. If you would want to be here to hear the case at that time, meeting start at 7:30, December 2nd.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice night.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, motion to adjourn. Anyone have anything else?
That's one of the few times where our attorney conflicted with our engineer and left me confused.
You know, I think
Not the first time you're confused, first time.
I hope I didn't confuse you.
Well, you both are experts and you're different in your advice.
Oh, sure, because his is technical and mine is legal. Those are sometimes different.
Yeah. Actually, I want to just make one point.
And normally,
Maybe we
While
wait
we're
till
on the record, we're still on the meeting. Let's get off the record first.
Yes, they are on.
We're still in session, I believe.
Yeah.
We're still in session. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay, but that's all we're going to hear on that case tonight.
So if you want to go home and enjoy the evening,
Kickoff is in
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
yep.
Jets, Patriots tonight. See, that emptied it out.
English rich.
Bye.
So it's EAS.
Yeah,
Those are
I-
really interchangeable at the board level. I understand there's a federal EIS,
Yeah,
and we're never talking about
I
that.
just
Yes,
wanted
we
to.
do. It's nice.
We
to
don't
Sometimes called it
want to
an
hear
EIS,
anything about this
I know,
case right
it's just
now.
an
Sometimes
EIS
it's
tends
ES.
to be a more loaded
We
term.
don't want to
you know,
hear
with
anything
thousands
about
of
it. We'll hear
pages.
about it at the
board
December
level,
2nd.
And I'll be here.
So
You're right, Don.
Because we
Different
don't want to
other
be
levels. They
Yeah.
considered to be
I just
biased
wanted to make
anyway.
clear that they probably
Yeah,
have
go on. Are you parked down at the very end?
put it in a.
Down, are you parked all the way down there?
Provide it.
Yeah, you can go out that way. So just,
They were
go
going to
down.
provide all that
Raises an
information.
plan issue.
Testimony.
Yeah, what, does it,
Everything that was in
they
the
were just
testimony,
say on the record?
but they didn't have it.
What,
I just wait for them to clear it.
Yeah, okay.
But they were going to provide the testimony.
I
That's
saw
why.
it.
We don't want to talk about it.
That's well, we have an attorney.
No, I understand that, but there are procedures that our attorney would tell us we shouldn't talk about. Okay?
I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you, I understand that, but I've been in land use law a long
Okay,
time.
we're
Attorney's
still
gonna
in
say, shut
session.
up.
You are.
Have a good evening.
Night.
Okay, you had,
Oh, I was just going to say that I think tonight's application raises a master plan issue. It would be nice to better explain what an environmental assessment study is meant to include, because your ordinance is pretty light on the details. And if we're going to hold applicants to this, which I think we should, it'd be good to give them some guidelines.
And I'll say that Susan was absolutely correct to say that there's a difference.
wait, just to say, yeah, I think we're cleared. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
Susan was absolutely correct to say on the record that there is sometimes a difference between an EAS and an EIS. Those are usually used interchangeably at the planning board or the zoning board level, but there are other levels of review that that is meaningful. Anyway.
Okay. Anyone have anything else? Okay, I think tonight raised some good points, and for the newer board members, it's good to see that. Over the years that I've been on the board, the checklist has been carefully developed because of things like this, that applicants know, okay, I have to provide this, that, and the other thing, or my application is not complete. And it's over the years that it's been developed to accommodate those things and make sure that the application knows what they have to provide. Now, they may have been able to provide the necessary information that would normally be contained in an EAS through testimony. The point is still, it's a checklist item that's rather significant, particularly in that area. It's environmentally sensitive. The steep slopes ordinance was designed after this application, in part because of that application. And I think to say, oh, we can skate around that, wouldn't have done service to the checklist or to the effort that was put in by the governing body with the planning board's advice to develop the steep slopes ordinance. So
And maybe we shouldn't have polled the members and put them on the spot, and the engineer on the spot, who, in his testimony, we didn't listen to, was kind of.
I think it was spot on to do exactly that, and we can disagree on that. That's fine. I think the engineer, from a technical point of view, he felt that this could be done through, but he's looking at this from a technical review standpoint. I'm looking at it from a legal review standpoint, and if we're not requiring an environmental assessment statement with regard to a steep slope variance, I'm not sure where, we may as well cross it off the checklist.
So are those things that could just be on the list that Susan would deem it incomplete and it would never even come?
She could, but I think she wisely put that. This was we spoke at length about this, and she wisely said, we'll let it proceed, and if the board has questions about that, we can address them during the waivers, which is what happened.
Now, one of the questions I was going to get to eventually, after I heard the testimony, was this was all approved in 2002. Now, steep slopes, wetlands, environmental impact, all of these have changed since 2002.
Correct.
So is this application still based upon what was approved in 2002?
No,
Or do they have to meet all of the current
Has to be current.
standards?
Current law.
And
Current law.
your environmental assessment requirement has been in place since the 70s, I believe,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
But if they're not approved, they can go back.
If they're
and
not
build.
approved, it reverts to
Can I
the-
suggest we close the meeting and go off the record? If we want to continue to discuss, we can do
I actually have an
that.
item, and Mr. Carlson, you can tell me if I should shut up. In looking at the master plan. and
Shut
look-
up. I just wanted to say
Well,
that.
just to be on the safe side,
And you gave
I'll
me
entertain
permission.
a motion to go into closed session.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So moved.
Second?
Second, Von Aiken.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion to adjourn.
So moved, Dinsmore.
Dinsmore to adjourn, second.
Apparently.
Parowick to adjourn.